On the morning of April 6, 1933, Americans opened their newspapers to find that their gold was now the government's gold. Not tomorrow, not after some legal process. Now, Executive Order 6102 had been signed the day before. It gave citizens 26 days to surrender every gold coin, every gold bar, every gold certificate they owned at a price the government set, $2,067 per ounce. Refusal meant a $10,000 fine, 10 years in prison, both. The United States government had just made it a federal crime to own the money Americans had carried in their pockets their entire lives. And here is the question that haunts every gold owner today. Nearly a century later, could they do it again? The answer requires understanding what actually happened in 1933. Not the official story, the forensic one. Because the official story says Americans complied, that they were patriots in a crisis, that they walked into their banks, surrendered their gold, and accepted paper dollars in return. The forensic record tells a completely different story. According to economists Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz, between 75 and 80% of privately held gold was never turned in. 3 out of every 4 ounces hidden, buried, shipped overseas, reclassified, kept. The question isn't just whether the government could confiscate gold again. The question is, how did millions of ordinary Americans beat the last confiscation? And what does that tell us about what actually works? To understand what people did, you have to understand what the government was actually trying to do. By April 1933, FDR had been president for exactly 1 month. The Depression was in its 4th year. 15 million Americans were unemployed. Half the nation's children lacked adequate food or shelter. Over 9,000 banks had failed. 3 weeks before the order, Roosevelt had shut every bank in the country. No withdrawals, no deposits, nothing. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York's gold reserves had dropped below the legal minimum required to back paper currency. The system was hours from collapse. When banks reopened on March 13th, depositors surprised everyone. They stood in line not to withdraw money, but to put it back. FDR's first fireside chat had worked. But the deeper problem remained. The United States was hemorrhaging gold. Foreign creditors were demanding payment in metal, not paper. American citizens were hoarding coins instead of spending them. Every dollar in circulation was legally redeemable for gold on demand, and people were starting to demand it. The gold standard was the constraint. The government needed to break it. But you can't devalue your currency while citizens can still exchange paper for gold at the old rate. The gold had to come out of private hands first. EO 62 was not primarily about punishing hoarders. It was about gaining control of the monetary system. The confiscation was the prerequisite. What came after was the actual plan. 9 months after Americans surrendered their gold at $2,067 per ounce, FDR signed the Gold Reserve Act of January 1934 and issued a proclamation the very next day. Gold was now officially worth $35 per ounce. The government's gold reserves, much of it collected from citizens, jumped in book value by nearly $3 billion overnight. Citizens who had complied had been paid 59 cents on the dollar for their own property. The gold they surrendered immediately became worth 69% more. The Americans who kept their gold quietly doubled their purchasing power relative to those who didn't. Now, the enforcement, the order threatened 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, roughly $250,000 in today's money. The newspapers ran it. Radio broadcasts framed surrender as patriotism. Bank posters went up everywhere. What actually happened? Exactly 1 person was ever prosecuted directly under executive order. 6,102 itself. One Frederick Barber Campbell, a 62-year-old Harvard Law graduate and Wall Street attorney who had deposited 5,000 troy ounces of gold bullion at Chase National Bank. When he tried to reclaim it in September 1933, Chase refused and handed him over to federal authorities. Among the prosecutors assigned to his case, a young assistant U.S. attorney named Thomas Dewey, who would later run for president twice. The judge ruled EO 6002 was technically invalid, signed by the wrong official. But Campbell's gold was confiscated anyway. He never got it back. A handful of others were prosecuted under follow-on orders. A jeweler caught in a Secret Service sting, selling 13 gold coins without a license. A father and son running a gold refining business under a fraudulent permit. A foreign corporation that had stored gold with an American firm. Total documented prosecutions in the entire United States, roughly 20 people. No home raids, no door-to-door searches. The story you may have heard about IRS agents sealing safe deposit boxes and searching them. That is a documented hoax. It never happened. The government got its gold primarily from one source, the institutions it already controlled. Banks, Federal Reserve member institutions, corporations with gold on their books, entities that couldn't hide anything and had no choice. The ordinary American with gold coins in a drawer or buried in a coffee tin in the backyard was functionally unreachable. So, how did millions of Americans keep their gold legally and practically? The forensic record reveals 4 specific methods that actually worked. The first was the personal exemption. EO 6102 allowed every individual to retain $100 in face value of gold coins, approximately 50. A family of 5 could legally hold $500 in gold, 24 ounces, simply by distributing coins across every family member, including children. Accounts from the period describe grandmothers carefully keeping just under the limit in their safe deposit boxes entirely legally for decades. The second was the numismatic exemption, and was a hole so large that entire fortunes fit through it. EO 60102 exempted gold coins having a recognized special value to collectors of rare and unusual coins. It never defined rare and unusual. It never specified who made that determination. It never published an approved list. Numismatic attorney David Gans noted decades later that if everyone had simply declared themselves a collector, they could have kept nearly everything they owned entirely legally. Treasury Secretary William Wooden, who oversaw implementation of EO 6102, was himself a serious coin collector. Some historians believe this was not a coincidence. The practical rule of thumb that emerged: no more than 5 coins of any single denomination and date in identical condition. Beyond that, any variation in date, mint to mark, or grade could support a numismatic claim. A person could theoretically assemble a nearly complete set of $20 double eagles and $10 eagles and hold them legally as a collection. In 1954, the Treasury formally expanded the definition to include all U.S. gold coins minted before April 5, 1933, retroactively legitimizing what millions had already been doing for 20 years. The third method was foreign storage. EO 612 applied to gold within the continental United States. Coin dealer Abe Kossoff arranged for wealthy clients to have their $20 gold pieces shipped to banks in Switzerland, France, the Netherlands, and Belgium before the deadline. When gold was re-legalized in 1974, coin dealers opened offices in Brussels, Paris, and Zurich specifically to source all that American gold coming home. One firm ran advertisements saying shipments were arriving daily from Europe. The gold had been sitting there for 40 years waiting. The fourth method required nothing at all, just silence. There were no home raids. There were no systematic searches of rural properties, farmhouses, or private homes. Every documented prosecution involved someone who tried to sell, trade, or move large quantities of gold through the financial system and got caught doing it. The Americans, who simply kept their coins at home or buried on their property, were never found. Rural populations were entirely beyond enforcement reach. No evidence exists of a single prosecution originating from a farming community. The Americans who lost their gold trusted the banking system to hold it for them. The Americans who kept their gold trusted nothing but the gold itself and said nothing to anyone. America was not alone in 1933. Gold confiscation has a global history, and every instance followed the same pattern. Economic crisis, currency pressure, then forced surrender. Australia's Banking Act of 1959 empowered the government to require delivery of all gold to the Reserve Bank within 30 days. The provision was suspended in 1976, but it technically remains in the statute today. It could be reactivated. India's Gold Control Act of 1968 was the most ambitious confiscation attempt in any democracy and perhaps the most spectacular failure. Finance Minister Morarji Desai banned ownership of gold bars and coins, limiting families to 4 kilograms in jewelry form. Gold smuggling exploded. Goldsmiths staged nationwide protests for 3 years. Some, ruined by the overnight destruction of their trade, committed suicide. Private gold holdings actually increased during the control period from roughly 4,000 tons in 1974 to an estimated 25,000 tons today. The act was repealed in 1990 and failure. The Soviet Union was the most extreme case. Between 1928 and 1938, the NKVD arrested approximately 500,000 people on gold possession charges. Trafficking in gold was a capital offense. In the 1961 Rocket Fishenko case, currency speculators were executed after Crutch personally intervened to retroactively increase their sentences. In Switzerland, which has never confiscated gold in its history, constitutional amendments require public referendum, making confiscation politically inconceivable. Swiss refiners process roughly 70% of the world's gold bars. Confiscation would be economic self-destruction. The pattern across every case: confiscation requires a gold-backed currency system under pressure. The more gold is tied to the official money, the stronger the government's motive to seize it. Which brings us to the question this entire video has been building toward. The United States re-legalized private gold ownership on December 31, 1974. President Ford signed the order. The legal architecture Roosevelt had used. Specifically, Section 5B of the Trading with the Enemy Act was fundamentally changed in 1977. Congress amended that statute to strip the president's emergency powers over gold during peacetime. The new language restricted those powers to the time of war, meaning a formal congressional declaration of war. The United States has not declared war since 1941. The successor emergency statute, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, grants broad powers, but with critical limitations. Legal scholars have noted it authorizes asset freezing, not asset seizure. It requires that any threat originates substantially from outside the United States, ruling out a purely domestic financial crisis, and has never been used to confiscate gold from American citizens. The Fifth Amendment's takings clause now presents a constitutional barrier that didn't exist in practical terms in 1933. The government would be required to pay fair market value. With gold trading at over $2,000 per ounce, with no fixed official rate to hide behind, the government could not replicate the 1933 trick of paying $20 and then immediately revaluing to $35. The practical enforcement gap is wider still. In 1933, most gold was in banks, institutions the government already controlled. Today, gold can be purchased anonymously at coin shops, stored at home, kept in private vaults, or held in foreign jurisdictions. No federal registry of gold owners exists. Gold American Eagles are specifically exempt from the reporting required for most investment sales. If you hold gold ETFs, funds like GLD or IAU, that gold sits in custodian bank vaults. A regulatory order to those custodians could freeze or seize that gold instantly. If you hold gold in an IRA through an approved custodian, it flows through the tax system. It's tracked. It's reachable. Those are the modern equivalents of the 1933 bank deposit. Physical gold in private hands is virtually unreachable through any legal mechanism that currently exists. The realistic modern threats are not confiscation. They are taxation. Congress could raise the collectibles rate or impose a windfall profits tax on gold gains. They are enhanced reporting requirements. They are capital controls restricting gold exports, outright seizure of physical gold from private citizens. Legal scholars across the ideological spectrum consider it implausible to the point of near impossibility under the current constitutional and statutory framework. Here is what the historical forensic record actually tells us. The 1933 gold confiscation was not the sweeping success the government presented it as. 3 out of 4 ounces were never surrendered. The people who lost their gold were those who stored it inside the system in banks with financial institutions in forms the government could see, reach, and control. The people who kept their gold were those who understood one thing the government was counting on them not to understand. That enforcement required visibility, and visibility was a choice. Today, some things have changed. The law is substantially different. The constitutional barriers are substantially higher. The enforcement mechanisms are substantially weaker. There is no gold-backed currency to protect, no monetary motive remotely comparable to 1933. But one thing hasn't changed. The gold that survives any government action, whether taxation, reporting requirements, or the highly unlikely scenario of a future confiscation attempt, is always the gold that is held privately, physically, and quietly. The gold the government can find is the gold the government can take. The lesson of 1933 wasn't written by FDR. It was written by the 75 to 80% of Americans who simply kept their mouth shut and their gold in their own hands. If you found this useful, the next video examines a question that came up repeatedly in the comments. What actually happens to gold when every major currency is failing simultaneously? When there's no safe foreign currency to escape into? That historical case exists, and the answer will surprise you. Subscribe so you don't miss it.